What's up, guys? Dylan here, and welcome to day 16 of Advent of Code 2020. If you like this video, find it helpful, please leave a like, as well as any questions or comments down below. And let's get into the solution. So, ticket translation. We're walking to another connecting flight, high-speed train, but we need to figure out what it says. We can't actually read the words on the tickets, but the fields these tickets must have in the valid ranges for those fields. Okay, so there's fields and valid ranges. We have a ticket and then nearby tickets. What are the rules for the tickets are specified by a list of fields somewhere on the ticket. Okay. And then start by determining which tickets are completely invalid. These are tickets that contain values which aren't valid for any field. So we could ignore our ticket for now. But for these nearby tickets, we need to use these nearby tickets to get basically weed out any numbers that are invalid for all the if this number doesn't fit into any of these ranges, then that whole ticket is invalid. Okay. Let's go ahead and get our input. Oh, whoa, that looks a little scary. Paste it in. Okay, so we need to find a way first to parse out these fields and ranges, and then to parse out the tickets. So I think what we're going to do here is we will make this a little similar to the way that we normally do it. So we will start with open input16.txt as file. File is equal to, or data is equal to file.readLines, and then we'll remove the end line character. So data is equal to line.strip for line in data, and then we're gonna make two more lists here, fields and so this isn't gonna parse anything out yet. So we're gonna get fields and tickets. This won't parse anything out yet, but all these lines, just these lines, will go into fields, and all these lines will go into tickets. So we'll say fields tickets are equal to empty lists. And then we'll say for line in data if, and we need to find a way to uniquely identify these lines. So I think, okay, so if or is in the line, if or in line dot append to, then we'll say fields, my bad, fields dot append line. And then I think it'll work if we say if comma in line, then append it to tickets. Else if comma in line, then tickets dot append line. Okay, and then if we go ahead and for line in fields, print line, and then for, let's just go ahead and check these out, line in tickets, print line. All right, so if we print those out here, perfect. So let's make sure we have all these. So zone all the way up to departure location. So departure location down to zone, and then the first one, 149, and then 174. Just making sure we have everything. 149, and we'll ignore the first line for now. And 174. Okay, good. So we, okay, we'll get rid of that here. And so we're gonna write a function def find invalids, and find invalids will give us, so ranges is going to be equal to some lists, perhaps, and then we just need to go through, then for each line, we need to check each number within the line. Okay. For each range. So I think we'll have three loops going on here. So then we'll say for line in tickets, and so this will just be a string for now separated by commas. We'll say ticket, we'll say, how about line is equal to line dot split, comma, and then ticket is equal to int num for num in line. And then also, I guess I forgot up here, so when we find an invalid number, then we will add it to this list so we can get the sum at the end. And so now we need to know what our ranges are. So we're going to make a quick detour and write a function called get ranges to parse out the ranges. So we can see here in our ranges we have kind of this first part, which is the field, and then these two ranges. So I think what we could do is first we're going to split up the string with this is the delimiter, so we'll get just the field and then just the ranges. And then from there, we'll split up this half. We'll split up this half by this delimiter and then take out the numbers. And I'm guessing we have to do something with the ranges associated with the fields later. So I'm going to put them into dictionaries. Okay, so we'll say ranges is equal to dictionary. And then for, let's see, for line in fields, we'll say line is equal to line dot split, and we'll use colon space, line dot split colon space. So now let's go ahead and print line just to see what we have here, and call the function get ranges. So okay, perfect. So then we can say field will be equal to line 0, and then now line will now be equal to line 1 dot split, and we can split with space or space. So space or space, and now print line, and so now we should see, okay, perfect. And then from there we can say the upper, I guess the lower range will be equal to, well, first let's split up, we got to split up these. So we'll say range A and range B will be equal to line 0 dot split, oops, what did I just type? Dot split dash 0. Well, okay, yeah, there we go. And then B will be equal to line 1 dot split, also with the dash. And then we can say upper, or I guess we'll do lower first. Lower will be equal to let's do a tuple. So a 0, comma a 1, and currently these are strings. So let's go ahead and turn them to ints. Oops. Okay, and then same thing for the upper range. Int of b0, comma int of b1, and I think this should do it. And then we'll say ranges field will be equal to the tuple lower, comma upper, and then we'll say for I, j in ranges, print I, comma j. So now we'll see what we have. And this should be ranges.items. Okay, so now we'll see what we have. Okay, and you can see this field departure location is now associated with the first range or the second range in the form of a tuple. So we keep our values together. Okay, so at this point we can just return our dictionary of ranges. Okay, so now if we go to find invalids, ranges will be equal to get ranges. And we can get rid of that here. So ranges is equal to get ranges. And then for line and tickets, line, okay, so now we have all the numbers in the ticket. And then for num in ticket, we need to check that ticket against each field and ranges. So for field and range in ranges.items, then we'll say A1, B1, A2, B2, arbitrarily naming these ranges, are going to equal to our, so lower range, first value, lower range, second value, upper range, first value, and upper range, second value. So this A1, B1 corresponds to 32 and 174, and this A2, B2 corresponds to 190 and 967. Okay, and then we'll say for line and tickets, and then we can say, okay, so check the number for each field. So if we'll say if num in range A1 to B1, but this won't include, this will be exclusive of B1, so we'll say B1 plus 1, or num in range A2, B2 plus 1. So if the number's in that range, that number is valid, but we want to search for the invalid numbers. So we'll say not. So if it's not in that number, then we can say, well, first, I guess we will search for, we want to know, is line, or is valid ticket. Oh, we'll just say valid ticket is equal to, we'll assume it's a valid ticket for now, and if we find an invalid number, then this will turn to false. And then we can say valid num is equal to, we will so we're going to be searching for, so we'll say valid num is false. And if we find an invalid num, then we can say valid num is equal, oh, hold up, I think this is backwards. So valid num is equal to true. And then if we find an invalid num, valid num is equal to false. And then we don't need to search the ticket anymore. So then we'll say break. And then outside of that loop, so we don't need to check any more of the ranges, just it's an invalid number for one of the ranges, so that's good enough. And we'll say if not valid num, if not a valid num, then valid nums, well, yeah, I don't think we need this valid ticket yet, because we don't care if the ticket is valid or not, we just care about the num. So we'll say if not valid num, then invalid dot append num. Okay, I think that's good. And then return sum of invalid. I don't like that that's called invalid. We're going to rename that to invalid nums. So I think this should get the answer. So if we go ahead and print find invalids, what do we get? 11,000 or 118,045. Answer's too high. Okay, let's see what's going on here. Okay, so I think I figured out what's going on here. So I think what we want to do instead is, so like what we're doing right now is we're assuming the number is valid, and then if we find that it's not in a range, then we're automatically marking it as invalid. But for example, this 149 might be, it's invalid here, but it's valid here. But because we said it's invalid here, we automatically mark it as an invalid number. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to assume that the number is false, and then as soon as we find a range that it fits into, then we will mark it as true. So if we run that again, yeah, you can see I already tested this. 19,240. Let's go ahead and try that. 19,240. All right, so there we go. So now part 2. Now that we've identified which tickets contain invalid values, discard those tickets entirely. So if it has an invalid value, get rid of it. Using the valid rangers for each field, determine what order the fields appear on the tickets. Okay. Based on the nearby tickets. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and try it, and then multiply the 6 values from departure in our ticket. Okay, so we have to figure out which field goes to which column in the ticket. So, well, first of all, let's modify this find invalids to return a list of valid tickets. So, valid tickets will be equal to a list. And then, I guess, yeah, now we'll track if the ticket is valid. So we'll assume the ticket is valid, true. And then if not valid num, so if we've found an invalid number, then we'll say valid, and this should say valid ticket. Valid ticket is now false. And then on the outside of that loop, we'll say if valid ticket, then valid tickets dot append ticket. I think that'll work. So then we'll return it down here, valid tickets, and that means we will have to say num invalid tickets is equal to find invalids, and then print num. Okay, so let's make sure the first part of the function still works. Okay, so same answer there. And then we'll say for ticket in valid tickets, print ticket. Okay, so in theory, each of these tickets is a valid ticket. So let's hope that worked. Okay, so now we'll say def find solve def solve fields. So we'll say ranges again. Yeah, see here I thought we were going to need to associate the fields to their ranges, because that's just how these problems are. And then for each field, I'm thinking then because what I'm guessing here is it would be nice if we ran through and each field only had one possibility, but I'm assuming that's not the case, because that would be kind of easy. So I'm gonna make a list of valid columns, I guess, or yeah, valid columns is going to be equal to dictionary, and then this dictionary will contain as the keys will be each of the fields. The keys will be the fields, and then the values will be a list of numbers that are a list of positions in the ticket that could possibly apply to the range. So now we'll say this time we'll say for field and range in ranges dot items. So we'll go ahead and add that field to valid columns. So valid columns field is equal to an empty list, and we'll be able to append to this list later on. And we'll take this line from before, steal, I guess, because yeah, I think we are going to still need it. So then we say for I in range length of ticket 0, so this is just how many possible fields there are, ticket 0. And what's wrong here? Okay, that should be better. So basically for each column, we'll just check down the column. And then, so then we'll say for ticket in valid tickets, num is equal to ticket I, and then if, and I'm lazy and don't want to type, so we'll say we're going to take this from up here earlier. So if it's in the range, then we are good to go. So we'll say continue. Else, well, I'm thinking if we just write, okay, this didn't work the first time, but it might work this time. So if it's not in the range of the field that we're checking, if it's not in one of these two ranges, then say, well, we'll make a variable here for found, and that's equal to true. So we'll say found is equal to true. So what found is means we found a valid column. So, but if the number's not in the range, then found is equal to false. And break. At that point, we don't need to check the rest of the column. And then we'll say if found, then valid calls field dot append I. So this column number is a potential column number that it could fit. All right, so then we'll say, so that I think technically should check each of the columns against each of the fields. So then we'll say for I, j in valid calls dot items print I, j. So let's see what we're working with here. And it didn't run, okay. Oh, well, of course not. Got to call function. Solve fields. Okay, so now you can see here we have some lists. And this is interesting. So train here can only go into column 15. So that means 15 is taken by train. So now class can only go into 11. And now 11 and 15 are taken by two others. So now arrival station goes into 16, which would mean arrival platform goes into 14. And I'm guessing that pattern continues and so on. So we'll say for field and possible calls, let's call it what it is, call it a field. In, I just had it, in valid calls dot items, and for I in range length of valid calls, because I think there's that will give us however many fields there are. If length of valid calls field is equal to I, then suppose that should be I plus 1, because there will be none of length 0. There will be none of length 0, but we want to match 0 to the first to a length of 1. So okay, then I guess we'll keep track of the ones that we found so far. Solved, so we'll say solved indexes is equal to an empty list. And let's say if, we're going to back this up here. We're going to say for I in range length of fields, because I know that's going to work. Okay, in range length of fields for field and possible columns in valid call.items, if the length is equal to I plus 1, then within that list for I in, well, we don't even need to call this. We just need to call possible calls. So for, and then we'll say for j in possible calls, if j not in solved indexes dot append j, and then we'll make another list of solved fields, and we'll say solved fields field is equal to j, and then break, might as well, and then at the very end So that'll solve the fields. And then for, I guess, for field and column in solved fields dot items and we'll have a total if departure in field, then total times equals valid ticket 0, because our ticket is the top one in the list, and column. And then return total. And so just so you guys can see what's going on here. So you can see that before we had in these valid calls, we have all the valid columns for a field. And then if we say for ij in solved fields dot items, print ij, you'll see now it's down to one item. And well, if we call solve fields. So now you can see each field has been matched to one location, kind of just based off of getting rid of one at a time. So now we will say print, and don't print that anymore. So if we go ahead and run that, we get a very large number, hopefully not too large like they always tell us. Okay, and there's the answer. So there you have it, day number 16 for Advent of Code 2020. Just a reminder, link to the code is in the description, and I'll see you tomorrow for day 17.